Hey everyone, Oldies DJ Matt here. Welcome to episode 5 of my one-off 8-part video series called An Introduction to Deep Diving into Rock and Roll Music of the 60s and 70s and some 80s. At the start of episode 1 and 2 of this series, you'll find an explanation of what the series is about, how it's formatted, who it's intended for, why it's only a one-off series. If you stumbled on this episode and haven't seen the ones before, I invite you to go back. Also, if you're interested in being notified when new videos are posted, I'm kind of new at this, but I believe that if you have a Google account and you hit the subscribe button, when new videos are posted, you'll receive a notification. There's a possibility that something else will be, a new project will be done after episode 8. I got an idea from an email that I got from the moderator of oldiesboard.com, Mike Riccio. That might result in an episode 9 or something at one point. We'll see. So if you want to find out about future endeavors, I think the best way to do that is to subscribe. Okay, so we have 6 great albums to talk about. We're going to look at another lost hit. This one from 1970. This one's going to blow your mind. You're not going to see this one coming. And I'm going to tell you about a couple other radio shows that you can hear on Pop Gold Radio. So let's get started. We're going to begin with the second album by the group Santana, called Abraxas. This came out in 1970. Look at that. Beautiful album art. And here's a picture of the band. So yeah, Santana is a band and functions as a band. A few of the members are contributing compositions on Abraxas. The band started as a blues band with Carlos as the visionary leader in 1966 in San Francisco. And after a while, Carlos wanted to get away from the blues and start incorporating Latin sounds in his music. So to that end, a couple percussionists were added to the group, and one important addition was new keyboard player vocalist Greg Raleigh, who I think this all happened in early 1969, and thus you have the birth of what is referred to as the classic lineup of Santana. They got a record deal. They appeared at Woodstock before their first album was even released. Made quite an impression. There's some great footage of that in the documentary. And their first album was good. I thought the songs kind of all sounded similar. Jingo was a minor hit. Evil Ways was a much bigger hit. But having gotten the experience of this first album behind them, they seem to approach Abraxas with the doors open to more different types of styles and more different sounds. The album opens with a spacey, dreamy, improvisational piece which segues beautifully into Black Magic Woman, Gypsy Queen, the biggest hit on the album. And I feel sorry for the folks who went out and got a copy of Santana's Greatest Hits a few years later, because the version of Black Magic Woman on that Greatest Hits album is the single version, which doesn't include the Gypsy Queen instrumental. Very disappointing. The other hits on this album, you have Oye Como Va, which is a cha-cha, originally by Tito Puente, or maybe it's Bossa Nova. No, I think it's a cha-cha. And then you have a samba piece called Samba Pa Ti. You probably know this instrumental, but just don't recognize the title. Another popular instrumental was Se Acabó. And I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly. You have the all-out rocker, I Hope You're Feeling Better. If I was to describe Abraxas with one word, it would be beautiful. Carlos Santana's playing is lyrical. It's expressive. You can identify him instantly. But the other stars of this album are the percussionists. They'd been playing together for a while, so they had a good, synergy and chemistry with each other. But it seems that they're adding all the right elements of elegance. You got the accent notes, the critical pause, or other elements that just make they seem to have the goal of making the percussion on this album sound beautiful, like nothing that you had ever heard before on mainstream pop and album rock, and they succeeded at that. And maybe that's why the classic lineup of Santana is held in such high regard. The classic lineup recorded one more album called Santana 3. After that, Carlos wanted to take the band in a jazz direction, and Greg Raleigh and one of the other members dropped out to form the band Journey, and that was the end of the classic lineup, but not the end of Santana, who continued to make some great albums. But I love the first three albums, and I'm recommending Abraxas from 1970. Okay, next, a look at another great singer-songwriter. Billy Joel, this is his 1977 album, The Stranger. I can't find my LP, so I had to print this. This is his fourth album on a major record label, but his fifth album overall. And by the way, if you're interested in collecting his actual first album called Cold Spring Harbor, be forewarned that the used record universe contains a lot of bad copies of that album. The first pressing of it on LP, I think on Family Records, was mastered at the wrong speed and sounds horrible. It should have been pulled from the shelves, but Billy had no control over that. Eventually, the album was properly remastered and reissued on Columbia, which means Sony Records, I think, these days. But Stranger could be described as his second breakthrough. Before this, he was considered a popular and beloved and respected singer-songwriter, but this album made him a star. This album is loaded with hits, starting with his first top 5 hit, Just the Way You Are. And this is another case similar to Black Magic Woman. The full-length version of that song appears on Stranger, but when I hear that song on the radio, I'm hearing the short single version, which is missing a verse. So I suspect that's the version that shows up on the hits compilations. But a lot of big hits on this album. She's Always a Woman to Me, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. I don't think that was released as a single, but the local pop station played it anyway. That's the Brenda and Eddie song. I love the wordplay in that song. I also love the wordplay in Only the Good Die Young. Definitely that one was released as a single. Yeah, I know that song irritated some folks, but I think Billy was singing it with a smile on his face, and he didn't mean any harm with it. The title song, The Stranger, is a fascinating examination of the private inner personality that we have, that we don't even show to our loved ones. And it has a mysterious piano introduction where he whistles a little bit and he plays that again at the end of the song. It's kind of spooky. Very well done. The song Vienna was not that popular when the album came out, but apparently it's a very popular download these days on Spotify. So, and another thing is that the band sounds great on The Stranger, and that's because Billy Joel finally had a full-time backup band. On his previous albums, he was working with studio musicians. It always sounded a little out of whack that you have this fantastic pianist and then the studio musicians just playing their part. Now you have, it sounds like a band. They're all into it. He continues on the same vein of this excellent songwriting and excellent sounding band on the follow-up album 52nd Street. So Billy Joel, The Stranger, 1977. Oh, what a songwriter. Okay, next. I hope you can see this picture clearly. The incomparable Janis Joplin. This is her second and final album, Pearl. And I understand this is one of the few times she actually sat down for a picture with a professional photographer. Here's another picture of Janis. So this album came out in 1971, January of 1971. She died in September of 1970. And one thing we knew about this album at the time it was released, which is worth pointing out, is that there were no posthumous production hands touching any of the songs on this album. Everything here is all Janis. She sat down with her producer and went through the final mixdown of all the songs and specifically approved each one as ready for release. So technically, though, the album was not quite finished. There was one more song where the instrumental track was recorded, but she didn't have the opportunity to record the vocal track for it. That song is included on Pearl as an instrumental, but the album always seemed kind of short, which is why the 30th anniversary CD reissue of this album is of interest. It contains 4 bonus tracks. These are recorded with the same backup band, called the Full Tilt Boogie Band, by the way, and these were recorded live in concert in Canada, I think before the Pearl album itself was recorded. She went on tour with the Grateful Dead in Canada, and these extra tracks took 30 years to make. Maybe they had to do some remastering or whatever to make it onto album, but it makes Pearl sound like a more complete album. So for Janis's career, her first album didn't quite work out to her satisfaction and wasn't particularly successful. And folks who worked with Janis describe her as a very serious performer, very serious musician, kind of nerdy, knowledgeable about music of different types and different oldies and different performers. And so she was determined to reboot her career and put something together that more represented what she was capable of after her first album. So she kept only 2 members of her original backup band, replaced the rest of them, got rid of the horn section and replaced that with a Hammond organ, got a new producer, changed the sound. It's a little quieter, but it's meant to be able to rock out and sound good on a living room hi-fi stereo. That was a big thing back in the day. And she picked out a wider variety of songs that were meant to challenge her, but also, please a wider audience. And Pearl worked very well. These days we consider Pearl to be her crowning achievement, but had she lived longer, it's quite likely she would have exceeded that with something even more fantastic in future efforts. But anyway, the hits on Pearl, Me and Bobby McGee, a couple of her own compositions, Move Over, her co-composition Mercedes-Benz, Cry Baby is a remake. I Like Tell Mama, one of the bonus tracks that was a hit for somebody else in 1968. This is a great album that showcases Janis as a singer. She's also playing acoustic guitar. At least she's playing that acoustic guitar on Me and Bobby McGee. I'm not sure if she plays it anywhere else. So if you're interested in Janis and in the San Francisco psychedelic bluesy sound, you're not going to find any of that here. But there is another album you'd be interested in. That would be the second album by Big Brother and the Holding Company, called Cheap Thrills, which came out in 1968. At that point, she was the central figure of the group Big Brother and the Holding Company, and she also handled the post-production on that album as well. So if you like the San Francisco psychedelic bluesy sound, that's the album that you also want to collect. But I definitely recommend Pearl, 1971, Janis Joplin's final release. Okay, next we have one of the best pop albums of the 70s, actually. The sixth album by the Electric Light Orchestra, called A New World Record. And I think it was at about this time when we all started finally calling the group ELO. So Jeff Lynne is the mastermind behind ELO. Singer, songwriter, a studio whiz. He overdubs most of the backup vocals. If you ask serious oldies, 60s and 70s oldies fans about songwriters, you ask them what 70s songwriter best captured the pop hooks and the Beatlesque joy of 60s music, the name you'll hear most often will probably be Jeff Lynne. And it's kind of odd. It took until ELO's fourth album for him to get in touch with this pop songwriting genius that he possesses. The fourth album by ELO, coming out in 1974, called El Dorado, a Symphony. And starting with that album, ELO's albums contained a great collection of pop songs, to the point that the record company probably had a hard time deciding which songs not to release as a single and just leave on the album as cuts. Another change that he made with ELO, starting with the El Dorado album, is that he started working with an external string arranger to write arrangements for the string players. I think before that he was doing these arrangements himself, kind of copying the George Martin style that was used on Beatles songs like Strawberry Fields Forever, or some of the songs on the White Album. With the new arranger, the ELO string section took on much more of an elegance, more classical influences, a lot of arpeggios and elegant segues between sections of songs, or even between songs, as is on the case of the El Dorado album. And the arranger also wrote sheet music for more than just the three string players in the band. So in the studio there were extra string players adding to the sound of a very full string section. But it's the pop songs that make ELO such a joy to listen to. This kept up for, I'm going to say, up through the 1979 album called Discovery. So you had El Dorado, Face the Music, New World Record, which is the album I'm highlighting here, then Out of the Blue, and then Discovery. New World Record, any of the songs on this album would have been big hits, but you have Living Thing, Do Ya, Telephone Line, Rock Area. I think those were the singles. Also, So Fine, Tightrope, Shangri-La. Basically just pop music at its best. ELO, New World Record, 1976. Okay, for our last album, we're going to venture into progressive rock with the 1982 album by Genesis called Three Sides Live. This album features a 62-minute excerpt of their most recent concert tour, which spreads out over three sides of the double LP as this was originally released. Thus the title, Three Sides Live. The fourth side contains unrelated, previously unreleased material. This album is kind of special because the concert tour includes mostly music that came from the group's 1977 through 1981 albums, and it thus captures the transition period of the group Genesis. and it's about the only place you can find this transition period it captured in one album. So what I'm talking about, if you're familiar with Genesis in the 80s, I'm sure most of you are, they were a prog pop band. They had a lot of big hits with songs like Invisible Touch, That's All, and Land of Confusion. That bears no resemblance to what Genesis sounded like in the early 70s. They were a progressive rock band at that point. Their songs were not structured as, you know, they weren't trying to get any album rock radio staples out of these songs. They were using a lot of classical influences. Their music was very beautiful. A lot of it was acoustic, and their album themes were very bizarre fantasy lyrics. The same three musicians in Genesis in the 80s were members of Genesis in the early 70s. But they also had Peter Gabriel singing lead vocals and a lead guitarist named Steve Hackett. I pulled this out just to give you an idea what Genesis was doing in the early 70s. This is their 1972 album Foxtrot. And you can see the fantasy kind of theme in the album artwork here. And yes, that is a woman with a fox's head. This was never popular in the US. I had to get this as an import. It's a shame it wasn't popular because there's a 20-minute length song on side 2 called Supper's Ready, which is a masterpiece. Very much like Yes, Close to the Edge. But anyway, getting back to Three Sides Live, this transition period happened after Peter Gabriel left the band and then Steve Hackett also left. And the group gradually transitioned from the deep progressive sound to the prog pop sound. But on the way, they were a progressive rock band, rocking out a little bit more with more straightforward song structure that made for good radio hits. The hits were mostly minor, but the significant stuff is here. Turn It On Again, Misunderstanding, Abacab, Follow You, Follow Me, popular album cuts, Afterglow, and the Behind the Lines Duchess medley. This is really a great period for Genesis that both fans of the prog pop and the prog rock period probably both enjoy. Genesis also sounds great in concert. Their solos are prepared. They don't actually improvise. So they are able to produce in concert, very accurately reproduce the sound of their studio albums. In fact, they actually sound a little better. They sound like they're a little more familiar with the material. Maybe they recorded them only shortly after learning the material and rehearsing it. The album is, the band rather, is augmented with a bass guitar player. So Mike Rutherford or Tony doesn't have to double on bass, which actually helps songs like Abacab. The bass guitar sounds much better than the synthesizer bass. And there's a different drummer playing on all the songs. Chester Thompson Phil's on the front of the stage singing with a hand microphone most of the time. But when there's an instrumental break that's particularly long, Phil will go back with his own drum set, and you have two drummers. It can be quite exciting. So the album not only captures a great period for Genesis, but it also sounds really good. So, Three Sides Live from 1982. Okay. So, did you listen to the Carpenters' hit, All You Get From Love Is a Love Song, the last episode's lost single? Isn't that a great song? Wow. It's hard to imagine that song only peaked at number 35. Anyway, we're going to look at another 70s act that you're probably familiar with. This act is also known for soft rock. But don't expect that to be what you hear. This episode's lost hit is from the group Bread. It came out in 1970, and it's called Let Your Love Go. Please go to the YouTube page and click on the link for the video. This is not going to be what you expect from Bread. It's kind of a surprise, actually, that it's written by David Gates, who's known for doing all these ballads and soft rock songs. Let Your Love Go is a rocker. It's a lot of fun to listen to. Very suggestive lyrics, but kind of thinly disguised. There was a lot of that going on around 1969 or 1970. There was a song called Lay a Little Lovin' on Me by Robin McNamara. There's a great double entendre. Or Jam Up and Jelly Tight by Tommy Rowe. Whoa. Anyway, so listen to Let Your Love Go. That is this episode's lost hit. So I'm going to close by telling you about two more great programs that you can hear on Pop Gold Radio. And that is at popgoldradio.com. I told you about them before. The Saturday program, The Time Machine, hosted by Tom Natoli, usually hosted actually by Don Tandler. And then you have Tom Natoli's specials, along with his occasional Wednesdays shows called The List. When you go to the Pop Gold Radio homepage, it lists the show schedule so you can find out what year, and a survey will be featured on the Time Machine, and you can find out when Tom Natoli will be hosting his specials. But the radio station also has two other weekly programs that I hadn't mentioned so far that don't appear at the very top of the webpage, and I want to make sure I tell you about them, as these are both excellent shows. They're quite different. I won't have to go into much detail because each program has its own website. The first program is called That Thing with Rich Appel. The website is thatthingshow.com. And that program is held at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturdays, plus or minus. That program is actually started right after the Time Machine ends. So that can be anywhere between 5:45 and 6:15 typically. Rich Appel is a very engaging DJ with a great radio presence, and he found a way to spin a lot of interesting details, music and otherwise, into his programs of great music. He also does special features about music, so check out the website thatthingshow.com. Rich is a lot of fun to listen to. The other program is Friday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a 5-hour long program. It is held 6 p.m. sharp. By the way, Rich's program is taped. He also syndicates that show to other stations. The Friday night show I'm telling you about is performed live. It is called the Friday Night 60s and 70s Show. The website is 60s70s.org. That's 60s70s.org. Besides being a live program, there's a lot of interaction with the audience. The host is Bob Radel. He's got this thing called the Listener Lounge and encourages participation. And it's kind of a social media type of thing. Hard to describe. But to summarize it, I talk a lot about going deep and beyond the narrow playlist of modern day music. The 60s and 70s show goes even deeper. So you will hear a lot of minor hits, a lot of rarities and obscurities, and you'll also hear some unusual things like Beatles rehearsal sessions and all other interesting things. So visit the website 60s70s.org for the Friday night 60s and 70s show. Okay, so that is it for episode 5. I will see you next for episode 6 in 2 weeks. As usual, I wish you peace, love, and rock and roll.